Good morning, folks. Today I wanted to present a video on how to capture the form edit URL on a form and capture it to the sheet, form response sheet. One of the first things you need to do if you want to capture the form edit is to make sure that the settings are set so that you're allowing response editing. Otherwise, you could collect this response, but people wouldn't be able to use it. So that's a setting to do. And this is just an example, very simple form just to test this project out. So here's our sheet. And what we're doing is, what we did was added a column called FormEditURL. And in order to not have to add into the script which column the FormEditURL is in, let's take a look at how we're doing that with the script in a way that allows this FormEditURL to be on any column. So let's take a look first of all at the script, and I want to show you how I went through several iterations of this in order to get it to work. So I was first using this first script here, and I was using it to get the form edit response, and after playing around with this quite a bit, I realized that the form edit response here, if we take a look at this, actually includes this specialized published form ID. And notice it's a little bit different than the normal form ID. If I were to take a look here and submit another response, notice this is basically the form response that is, you'll see in this line here, and then we add the edit question mark edit to equals, and then this next part is the ID. Well, as I was trying to build this, one of my first iterations actually looked something like this, where I was capturing the form ID, capturing the view ID, and then capturing the response ID, and I was gluing them together. And that was a little more complicated than it needed to be. So let's take a look at how I finally figured out how to do this. And what I want to show you right now is this first script, and I've commented out the part of the script that would have written this into the sheet. And the reason I had to change this is this worked fine, except it kept always adding the form response edit URL to the last row, so it was never matching up if you went back and actually used the form response edit and emailed it to somebody and they actually went ahead and used it, they wouldn't update the correct row if they were going to use that to update. So I had to make this a little more complicated, but let's take a look at this first script, which just captures all this information. I'm going to go ahead and run the show form info, and I just want to show you what we capture. So the first console.log is capturing the view form, and that is what would happen if you actually clicked here and went to look at that. Well, it's actually interesting because now this time you're getting the DE view form, which you don't always get. In this example, you can see here, we just get this view form. The regular form URL doesn't contain the /d/e. So what we do in the first console.log is we get the form URL, that's this, and then the next console.log we get the form ID. So we open the form by URL and get its ID, and that's this line. The next line is to get the published form, and that's this one that we see here. And this was the important part about the form edit URL, included this form plus this next line, which is the response ID, with so then the next step is capturing the actual form ID, and then again, there is, however, a latest response that does let me actually get the edit URL, which happens to be this plus this concatenated with this little bit of that. So anyway, that's how that all works. But as I had said, I found a problem with the simple way of doing this because it wasn't matching up my form IDs if I used the FormEditURL. So what we had to do is find a unique way to capture each row, and we are using the timestamp to do that. So while most of this is the same, what we did is we've also added a constant of the response timestamp, and in order for it to be consistent, we're doing it to an ISO string for format consistency. And then we're getting that URL. And then in this case, we're getting this active sheet. We're getting the headers of the active sheet, which would be this. We're getting these headers. And the reason we're capturing those headers is we're capturing the header row, and then we're capturing the index of the timestamp column, the index of that form URL column. And the reason we're doing that is then we would be able to move these columns around and this would still work. So if I added more columns, or this form edit URL, I wanted to move it to the front, whatever, that would all work. So we find that index, and then we make sure that the row with the timestamp matches the row with the response ID. And that's how we can ensure that we're getting the correct form edit URL onto the correct row if we make a change to it. So this is where we check for that. And if we don't find that row index, if we find the row index, we set the value of the latest response edit URL. Otherwise, we put an error out. So let's see how this actually works in practice. So here's an example. So let's say this line here, if this person wanted to edit this, they can see that that's Sue Holman. And what would happen if we change this to John, or let's change to a different name, Retha, and let's add a different name here, Fix. And let's take a look back at the sheet, and what we can see is the responder edited this line. It's the correct line, that's the one we just edited, and if we come back and take a look at it again, we can see that that's been edited. If we were to add a new row, let's actually get rid of this and take a look at this. Let's submit another response, and let's do something different here. Let's do Herman Smith and submit, and then take a look at the sheet real quick and see Herman Smith, and here comes that form edit URL, and let's take a look at it, and sure enough, Herman Smith. So this is how I was able to write this script, this version here, that solved the problem by using the timestamp to actually collect the form edit URL, write it to whichever line on this column we want to on our form response sheet. One thing I might point out, we're using the spreadsheet as the get active spreadsheet, and we're using the sheet here is to get the active sheet. If you wanted to be more specific and you had multiple sheets, you might change this to SS get sheet by name form responses 1, or whatever you may have renamed this to, just so you would always be capturing that. But I find this to be really useful sometimes when I am collecting data. I want to be able to capture the form edit URL. And I've found many different scripts that do this, but I wanted to write this one from scratch and share that with you.